All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to be doing the recap for exercise or Parkinson's education series that we are doing. Last month, we talked about building your healthcare team or building your team. This month, we talked about exercise as medicine, and we had that discussion earlier today. And we're going to be going over the recap, some of the highlights from that discussion that we had earlier today. So, first thing I wanted to kind of present or begin with is kind of a review of what we talked about last time. So building your team. So we kind of went over on the different healthcare professions that we talked about, the four main ones, which were movement disorder specialists, your physical therapist, your occupational therapist, and your speech therapist, right? Those kind of your four main ones that we talked about last time. And so we talked about different items that they could help you with, right? And so we would have to categorize some of these items into those four different professions or those healthcare members, right? And so, for example, right, if you needed someone to help manage the meds, you would maybe talk to the movement disorder specialist or the neurologist, right? That's helping keep track of that. That's not to say that the physical therapist, occupational therapist, or the speech therapist may not already know a little bit about those medications, but the managing aspect of it is going to come from the movement disorder specialist. Okay. Now, what about eating, right? Eating is one of those things that are very important, right? Obviously. And so we would think that that would be in the speech therapist category, right? And yes, that's true. But it also can be attributed a little bit to occupational therapy, right? Because the food has to make it from plate to mouth, right? And sometimes people with Parkinson's may experience that tremor. And so making that movement with the fork, spoon, whatever it is, right, can be a little bit difficult. And so occupational therapists can come up with strategies to help manage some of that, to make that a little bit easier because they work with activities of daily living, remember. And then exercise program was another hot topic that we talked about, right? Because that can actually be done by both the physical therapist and the occupational therapist, right? They both can make that exercise program accordingly. Maybe a physical therapist can probably come up with a full body exercise program that's specific to maybe whatever your needs are, right? But the occupational therapist can definitely come up with one as well. And then lastly, we talked about cognition, right? All of those can actually affect cognition in some way or another. We'll talk about that for right now. So movement disorder specialists can come up with medications, right, that can directly affect some of that cognition. Maybe we feel, like just a little slow with the thinking, and they can probably prescribe something, and they can help with that, right? That's a direct effect. But physical therapists and occupational therapists can do indirect effects, right, with cognition. How can that be? Well, exercise, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later, can definitely help with cognition, memory recall, all that stuff, processing speed. And so having that exercise is going to help, right? And then speech therapists can come up with strategies, techniques to help with some of those cognitive issues that we may have troubles with, like memory recall, that I mentioned earlier, and other types of cognition processes. So let's go ahead. Talk. I'm going to lead us into a little bit of a PowerPoint. It's a very bare bones presentation really that I did to kind of just show some videos, show some a table, a graphic, pretty much to kind of just hit home that exercise is important. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen about that right now. All right. So here it is. Living well with Parkinson's, aerobic exercise, and Parkinson's. So we'll go dive in a little bit deeper. So first we have this video that we have really four different videos going on here. You might recognize one of our members here. You might recognize even Claire here in the top left-hand corner. So some of us, the thought of exercise is something that kind of intimidates us or really just kind of makes us shy away from exercising, right? This is one individual that we have here at Rogue that didn't really consider herself active, didn't really consider her as a regular exerciser uh, before her diagnosis of Parkinson's. but she realizes the benefits, right? And so naturally, the more you do exercise, the better you get at it. So this is many videos of some of the amazing feats that she's able to do with exercise over the years. So yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day. This comes over, a period of time. When you stick at it, long-term effects, you start to get good at it, right? So we'll move on to our next video that we have here. We have two gentlemen, right? They are the same person. They're at two different points in time. We have one in February of 2017, the other at September 2019. We're going to be watching their walking. So I want you to pay close attention. We'll start with the gentleman here on the left. Okay, so we take a look here, right? Seeing them walk looks a little unstable. Maybe the steps could be a little, less rigid. The arm swing, seems a little bit more forced. Doesn't look as stable when walking. What about the gentleman here on the right? How does their walking look? This man looks like he's on a mission. He's walking faster. He's taking those nice big steps. And you don't see that kind of ankle whip as much on the right-hand side compared to the left, right? He definitely looks much more stable walking. And so this is kind of after a long-term program of exercise, right? Coming in consistently, being able to walk, and just feeling more comfortable with it. So that's definitely what exercise can do. And then lastly, what about the short term, right? Maybe some of you already experienced this, right? You are feeling slow, you're feeling sluggish, you might feel like, I feel so stiff, I can't really get myself going. And then you do a workout, you do exercise, and suddenly you feel a little bit better, right? So this pre-post workout, although it's a week apart, we have one on Halloween and we have here on November 7th. So it's about a week apart, but it tracks how someone might feel maybe right before they get started and then after they get started. So let's go back a little bit. So let's watch this video. So left, obviously, walking a little slower, smaller steps, posture's a little stooped, right? And then we look at the right side. Wow, look at her go. She is moving. She is going. She is on a mission. She's getting herself wherever she needs to go. And this is after one round of exercise. And we'll talk about how this may be, right? There's a lot of factors that could be at work here, could be at play. And so we'll start to talk about some other aspects of this video. And then, of course, I wanted to bring up one of the really inspiring individual that is Jimmy Choi, right? Some of you may already know his story. Some of you probably already watched him on American Ninja Warrior. He is an individual that was diagnosed with Parkinson's at the age of 27. And although I won't play this video, you'll be able to find it in kind of our information section right underneath this video. If you want to take a look on your own time, you definitely could. We'll have that available for you. Okay. So definitely, if you have not heard about Jimmy Choi, definitely recommend hearing out his story and watching this video. All right. All right. And then we have a table here. So this next one's an interesting piece of information. So on how many of the past 7 days did you at least exercise for 30 minutes? So this is kind of an interesting table. So we'll break it down little by little here. So they're trying to look at frequency. How many days of the week are you exercising? And this is a question asked by movement disorder specialist, Dr. Mishley up in Seattle. And she has this assessment called the PRO-PD that looks at different symptoms of people with Parkinson's and evaluates them, gives them a score at the very end, how much those symptoms are affecting them. And so if you're looking at this table, we have this bottom half really in green. That's kind of a green's usually a good sign, right? So we'll start with this. This is showing us the days per week of exercise that they're doing. N right here just means our sample size. So how many individuals in that category are exercising 3 times a week. And the change in the PD score. So how much did that PD score improve by? 146 points seems like the average there, right? And then the p-value here is showing us how much of that correlation is based off of that days per week, right? So the smaller the p-value, the better the correlation. So we're looking at this, right? You can see 3, yeah, that's a pretty small number, 0.011. But the more you add exercise throughout your program throughout the week, right, you start to see better increase. And even more so, these last 3, 5, 6, 7 days a week of exercise are the ones that showed absolute positive change in that Pro PD score. So that is amazing, right? That means that 30 minutes of high intensity exercise, if you're doing that 5, 6, 7 days a week, you're going to absolutely see that change in your symptoms, right? So maybe not absolutely, of course. There's always exceptions to the rule, but that high intensity exercise really plays a huge factor in the role of Parkinson's, right? But we always like to start with 3 because that's a good number. That's less than half the days that of the week. And so that's always a good starting place to begin. And even going to 4 days a week, look at that jump from 0.01 to 0.002. Yeah, that's also an incredibly small number. So that's very good correlation there. All right. But what if you're asking, like, okay, so high intensity exercise, what does that look like? So let's go ahead, move on to this page here. So here at Row, we like to monitor how hard we're working, right? That high intensity is what we're aiming for. So how do we know when we're reaching it? Well, one of the ways we can track that, right, is through heart rate, right? Knowing what is our heart rate max is important, and knowing what is our target heart rate. So we have this cool software, cool technology that lets us kind of put on heart rate monitors and project them actively on the screen so that you can see your heart rate in real time and how that reflects on that heart rate max. So that little circle that you see here is going to be your percentage of heart rate max. Ideally, you're trying to be between 60 to 85% of your heart rate max when working out. That's how you know you're in high intensity. So you have to be there for 30 minutes, right? Of looking at the research, right? Looking at what we know. So these individuals you can see and up in 79%, Walter at 71, we have Maria Lane at 62, right? We have people coming up and meeting those ranges where we want them to be. So that's how we can definitely track how hard we're working. But what about if we don't have this fancy smancy technology, or maybe we have even conditions that might affect how high our heart rate might be able to go up, right? That could be pacemaker, that can be, AFib, whatever that is. That can definitely play a factor. Then you start to have to reflect on how hard you're working from 0 to 10. So if you're kind of using this scale, right, you have to really be pushing yourself from a 6 to a 10 to really try to get that high intensity. 10 being you can only sustain it for a little bit, for maybe max 10 seconds, right? 6, somewhere in between an effortful pace on a treadmill, right, is basically that's how hard you're working. So a little bit tough to talk, but you can manage and sustain that, right? So basically, that is how you should be tracking that high intensity when doing your exercise, right? Especially that aerobic exercise. All right. With all this talk about exercise, we already know some of these benefits, but let's go over them really quickly, right? We talked about prevention of cardiovascular complications, right? The healthier the heart, the better, right? And the way we make it healthier is we make it stronger. We have to make it stronger by exercising aerobically, using that muscle of the heart, making it stronger. And we also have arrest of osteoporosis. Pretty much that means stopping bone atrophy or preventing that bone from deteriorating. So strength training, great way to load the bones, right? We don't really talk about strength training too much in this presentation, but that is a great way to start fighting osteoporosis. And then we talked about improved cognitive function, right? Exercise can affect that, right? There's research to show that that is the case. There's prevention of depression. There is improved sleep when you're pushing yourself, right? You're going to get yourself tired and you're going to sleep better. Same with constipation, right? We get blood flowing through our body when we're exercising. It's going to make it to ways even like our stomach, our gut, going to push things along so we feel a little bit better. And so that's going to be ultimately a great plus. Decrease fatigue, because you know what? As you exercise, you build up endurance, which means you're less tired for things. And isn't that great? I love the way that works out. You would think it'd be the opposite, but no, as you start to get a little bit more endurance, you're going to start seeing that change. Improve functional motor performance. We talked about that with the gentleman's walk earlier. And then improve drug efficacy and optimization of the dopaminergic system. Pretty much just a fancy way of that dopamine system working a little bit better, working a little bit more efficient. And we looked at the member earlier with the cast, right? How even one round of exercise was able to improve her movement, right? So much better. And that's because blood gets circulating throughout your body, goes to your brain, goes to your legs, goes to your muscles, right? But you know what's traveling in that blood as well? Those medications, right? Like carbidopa, levodopa. If you are working out, it's going to be able to travel anywhere a little bit faster because you are working out, getting your heart rate up. Circulatory system is doing its job, and it's gonna be able to hit your system a lot quicker. So those are kind of the main things that we talked about. We talked about those significant changes that can happen. They can happen within those 6 to 8 weeks sometimes, but even have benefits in the short term. We talked about that 60 to 85% is the target for high intensity. And we talked about how all these improvements can happen to both our motor and non-motor symptoms, right? So that is the benefits of exercises that we talked about today. So hopefully that you learned a little bit, maybe something new, maybe just kind of reinforcing some of the stuff we already know. And hopefully this gives us a little extra motivation for exercise, right? Because ultimately we want to be able to improve, make progress, and we want this to have relevance in our life, right? It's not we exercise is good, but exercise with a purpose, right? To be able to play with grandchildren, to be able to do the stuff we love, like golfing, gardening, whatever that is going to be a much better motivation factor when we have to do exercise, right? Sometimes it's not the funnest, but it definitely can help us feel better. All right. That's going to do it for us today. Hopefully, you learned a little bit, and we hope to see you at our next recap next month. All right. See you later, everyone.